But we begin with a look at the White House. Later this hour, President Donald Trump will head to Florida for the weekend and will continue to monitor his movements. And that is the average price at the pump right now for a gallon of regular gas. We're talking $4.39, and that is up 9 cents in just 24 hours and $1.40 since the start of the U.S.-Israel war with Iran. But in states like California, some drivers are paying more than just $6 to get around. It has forced some people to simply leave their cars at home.
I mean, gas prices are pretty crazy right now, which any way to try to save a little bit of money if I can.
I can spend the same on a gallon of gas and get around all-day bus pass on Metrolink.
I went to go visit my mom, and she's in Rancho Cucamonga, and gas is way too expensive to drive all the way out there. I actually might keep using it.
All right, let's go live outside the White House to CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand. Hey, Natalie, so oil prices reached a 4-year high on Thursday, with crude oil briefly topping $126 a barrel. Can you tell us about some breaking news that you just got that can bring some relief to Americans? What are you learning?
Well, right now, Mugo, we are learning from Iranian state media that Iran has handed over its latest revised proposal to Pakistani mediators. And our Imtiaz Tayyab reports that a spokesman for Iran says ending the war is the top priority in this latest proposal. But this comes, of course, after the Trump administration had rejected earlier proposals that sought to push off any discussion of nuclear issues to a further date. That proposal had focused on the Strait of Hormuz, but not the nuclear issues, which, as you know, has been really the #1 stated goal of the Trump administration in this conflict, to make sure that Iran does not obtain nuclear weapons. Now, we are awaiting a response from the White House or the president, or even confirmation that the U.S. side has received these negotiations or this latest proposal. And it's also important to note that, you know, it was earlier this week that the president said his negotiating team would not be flying to Pakistan for in-person talks every time a new proposal was submitted, that they could do a lot of this over the phone, Mugo.
And in the meantime, Natalie, has the president said how he plans to ease the pain at the pump for Americans like the ones we just heard from in California?
Yeah, the president, as recently as yesterday afternoon in the Oval Office, continues to argue that he thinks Iran wants to make a deal badly. He believes this will be resolved shortly, hopefully. And he's kind of framed this as short-term pain for this much larger goal of, again, making sure Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. But, you know, even his own administration officials have said it could be some time before we see prices drop to the low levels they were earlier this year, at the start of this year. Here's more of the president's comments yesterday in the Oval Office.
The gas will go down. As soon as the war's over, it'll drop like a rock. There's so much of it. It's all over the place, sitting all over the oceans of the world. And it'll go down.
You know, and while GOP lawmakers over on Capitol Hill have largely remained supportive of the administration's military operation in Iran, some have publicly acknowledged that these high prices are becoming a political issue. You know, the midterms just months away now. And we know from hearing from drivers and voters out there, this is on their minds because they need gas to fill up their tanks and get on with their day, go to work or school or whatever it is. And business owners, small business owners, are expressing that it's really making long-term planning difficult for them because it's just unknown right now how long this standoff, this conflict is going to drag on.
Okay. Natalie Brand outside the White House for us today. Thank you so much. And now to CBS News Money Watch correspondent and co-host of CBS Saturday Morning, Kelly O'Grady. Kelly, good to see you. So we know oil prices are clearly still high. And this morning, Chevron and ExxonMobil, they both reported weak first quarter earnings. My question is, does this give these companies more or less incentive to follow through with President Trump's push to produce more oil here in the U.S.?
So I'm going to quote something that Natalie just said, right? You know, just like those businesses are dealing with uncertainty, so are these oil companies, because they're looking at the situation and they don't know how high these prices are going to go. They don't know how long that's going to be. They don't know if prices are going to go so high, and that translates to more pain at the pump, that people like you and me are going to just take a step back on driving, and then that lowers demand. They don't want to be sitting on excess product that they actually can't sell at that high price that they're seeing. And remember, these companies, if they were to decide to produce more oil, that requires drilling, that requires building infrastructure, billions of dollars that they're not going to recoup that investment for months, maybe even years to come. And so it's a really looking at a short-term problem and having to make a long-term investment. And what we've been hearing is that they are just not sure right now that that is in the best financial interest. One note on the earnings, though, you mentioned that they were weak. I'm just going to caveat that by saying that we only saw, we just got some light go out here in the broadcast center. We saw the profit go down in comparison to the same quarter last year. It's really just an accounting thing. They can't actually book the revenue that they expected from the oil because it's kind of stuck out there. They will get that revenue in future quarters. And so actually when you strip out all that noise, the oil companies are doing really well. The refineries for Chevron saw a 200% boost in profit versus the same quarter last year because of those higher prices. But again, they just don't know how long this is going to last, and they're not going to make any billions of payout for something that may not actually last for very long.
Yeah, but that 200% boost you talked about, that is a big deal. It really is. Okay, Kelly, so gas prices jumped almost 10 cents overnight. Can you explain how these day-by-day spikes work?
Yes, and I think this is going to be really frustrating for what I'm about to say for people listening. So gas, it's not that gas station all of a sudden got in a shipment overnight that's higher in terms of cost, right? Because you might drive, there was one time ago, I was in California, I drove up to a gas station, I went around the block and the price changed. And so of course the shipment wasn't more expensive coming in the 10 seconds that it took me to drive around the block. What actually happens is these gas stations know that they're going to have to pay more based on the fluctuation in the price of oil the next time they get a shipment. So they adjust those prices higher in order to be able to afford that product. Now, I'm sure people watching are going, well, wait, is that them just price gouging me? Actually, gas stations don't have that big of a margin. Most of them are franchises, they're mom and pops, and they're just thinking about they need to have that cash because they know it's going to be more expensive when they get that shipment in next week.
Perspective, it all matters. Kelly O'Grady, as always, thank you so much for your insight. We appreciate it.